It is 102.7 WMOM and Hot Country Hits 99.9. Good morning to you, Erin Doan from Erin Doan State Farm Insurance. Thanks for joining us and happy Easter.
Hey, good morning. Thank you. Appreciate it very much, Chris. And happy Easter to you too.
We're going to be talking this morning about disability insurance. And in most cases, when customers are walking in and you're insuring them and you're talking to them, the first impression I would assume is that they're thinking about their cars and boats and homes and family. And sometimes we don't think about ourselves. So, the analogy of the golden goose versus the golden eggs being those items, the golden goose being what we should be thinking about when we put our oxygen mask on if we need it flying. That's as important as when we insure those items. Is that right?
It is. It's having that mindset that we're trying to protect what we're doing on a day-to-day basis for providing income for the family. And so each of us that provide income for our family are the golden goose, and all these wonderful things that we work so hard to acquire, the home and the toys and things, those are the the eggs that you as the golden goose are producing each and every week.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that as we navigate through this segment, especially as if you're reading our Facebook post along with this video or our YouTube or listen to the morning show as we previewed this segment. We're going to be talking about disability insurance, and when you connect the two, the idea of insuring the golden goose. It also extends to the potential of something happening in your life and making sure that you are fully covered for that. Is that kind of the connector as we talk this morning?
Yeah, I think it is. It's just realizing that life in general can be unpredictable. And if we get really hurt or sick and can't work, the disability income insurance really helps keep the basket full of your
Mhm.
golden eggs. In other words, the insurance company takes over and helps you provide those golden eggs to your family, if you will, and that income to pay the bills and the things that you've worked so hard to acquire. So, I think that's a great way to make the connection, Chris.
Let's talk about disability insurance. Do you think most people feel like, as part of their policy, that it just comes with disability insurance, or is that a second thought in many cases?
I think it's overall, it's not a thought at all, to be honest, in most families. It's we're so busy with so many things in life and, more than, about half of the consumers out there in the public that are working today have disability income insurance that they get from work. And about half of the companies work for small businesses or they're small business owners. And many of the small business owners, in fact, Chris, opt out of workers' comp.
Mm.
So this can be a critical area of you are really sick or hurt. You just need to realize that you won't have that income to pay the bills and the commitments you have, like the mortgage or the car loans or even the credit card loans that are so important to keep paying to maintain your credit score and to go without having to go into default. So at the time when we have a serious illness like cancer or a heart attack or some of these things and diseases that come upon us, even in our 20s, 30s, and 40s, it's super critical to have, protection that goes beyond your car insurance or your renter's insurance for most people, and just realizing that they even have a need.
Yeah, absolutely. For most people out there, maybe they don't understand what disability insurance is and maybe the spectrum of it. Do you mind breaking that down before we dive deeper into it?
Sure. What happens for an insurance company is when we're looking at this is we're asking you, what are your bills that are most important, which all the bills are that you need to pay, but we're trying to order them and rank them. And so what happens for a private insurance company is we're looking to give you cash on a monthly basis for if you become really sick or hurt and can't work for more than, let's say, 30 days or 60 days or even longer, that you have income coming in from your insurance company. So what most people don't have more than 30 or 60 days in our community of savings. So what happens is you're trying to protect your future income and to be able to stay in your home to maintain your lifestyle. So disability insurance basically is a way to replace the money you're going to get if you get so sick and hurt you just can't work for an extended period of time. And we call that an elimination period. So you choose how long in terms of your savings that you have that you can still take care of the bills, and then I need help. So most people realize, getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, that there are quite a few people in our communities that are on Social Security disability. But Chris, as we mentioned on other shows talking about this type of insurance in the past, it takes a year or two to get approved to get Social Security disability income from the government.
When we hear numbers or percentages like um, this covers 50 to 60% of the salary, is that what it is expected to do, or are we trying to get to that 100% when we look at disability insurance? Will we get to that 100%
No,
replacement?
that's a great question. In most group plans, it covers 66 and 2/3 of your income. So that money that comes to you, you do not pay taxes on that income if you need the benefit from a group disability policy. In most disability income that you buy from a private insurer like State Farm is you get 60% of your income. So the idea is to, if you think about your percentages, again, that comes to you without you having to claim that on your taxes. So if you will, you pay the premiums for disability income with a private company like State Farm out of your net income. If you needed to use the disability benefit, you get paid that money and not have to pay taxes on it again.
Mm, yeah.
Okay, so that 60% is mainly to be used for the most immediate bills and concerns. Where
Okay.
the difficulty can be in that window of time, and why insurance companies limit it to 60% or 66 and 2/3, is unfortunately is we're not going to pay for the dinners out, if you will, in terms of your budget, or for the toys, or for entertainment or things of that nature. What we're trying to do in the insurance world is protect you so you can get back to work, that there's, if you will, a desire and a need to get back to work and want to get healthy if possible. And if not, it at least gives you enough cash to keep going and not have a significant, complete change, catastrophic to your lifestyle, having to leave your apartment or the home you're renting, having your mortgage go into default. And so,
Mhm.
what the insurance is trying to do is protect that situation from you happening personally. And so in this, session, we're really talking to people mostly that are working for a small company, or they're small business owners listening to this conversation, and just think catastrophically, if this happened to you and you literally couldn't provide income to your family for 2, 3, 6, 8 months, a year or more, that's going to be devastating to your entire family on continuing your lifestyle in any fashion.
Two questions that come up: the difference between short-term disability and long-term disability. The first that would be the first question, and you kind of hinted a little bit on it as we've been talking this morning. But also, when does short-term become long-term?
Great question. So most policies can have a connector in for the group, people that have group benefits with short-term and long-term disability. However, I will say, before we dive into this too deep on this subject, is there can still be a gap. I've heard people tell me that their short-term policy from work will provide up to a year of income. So, what short term does is, it's literally like the word says, it's for typically a year to maybe as much as 3 years, and the benefit stops, Chris. No
Okay.
longer would you receive any monthly income. On the group side, to not get everybody completely confused, but just understand, if you don't understand your benefits from your handbook from work in terms
Mhm.
of when the short term stops, let's say after a year, and if your long term disability doesn't pick up for 18 months after you're disabled or 2 years, you can have a gap.
Okay.
So just know that there's people that have to file a short term disability claim. And if it's really serious and really hurting or sick for months, years, the long-term disability will kick in, typically somewhere between a year and 2 years down the road for most policies. Um, so it's just realizing that they both have their reasons, and there's reasons to consider both. But for some families, due to budget, is they definitely want to consider at least the short-term disability and look at that protection at least for 2 or 3 years until they can get Social Security disability to kick in. So it's that shorter window of time where you could literally lose your car because you're not paying your car loan, or after 90 or 120 days lose your home, or
Mhm.
that goes into foreclosure. And what this is meant to do is be a stopgap and then give you income so you can at least stay in your home.
I remember you talking in the past that even if you have disability insurance through your workplace, having that overlap
Hmm.
coverage seems to be important, and you just hinted on that, of course. Um, Not to go too far into the weeds here, but for somebody that has workplace coverage, where do you think the responsibility falls? Does it fall on them? Does it fall on your shoulders to understand their workplace policy so that you can get that overlapping coverage correct?
I think it's a combination of just realizing, first of all, that there could be a gap here. So it's a team effort.
Mhm.
Them to take a moment to look at it and say, what do my benefits really say? Do my benefits really say that I have a short-term disability that will completely connect with my long-term disability coverage at work? Or is there truly a gap? And so we're going to ask, can you show us your benefit package? Can you give us your handbook that describes what you have, and we'll help you understand it. We'll read it through with you, and we'll see if there is in fact a gap in the middle there. Again, realizing that most people, more than half of our communities in northern western Michigan are paycheck to paycheck. This could be devastating for so many families
Yeah.
to not at least have that gap in their benefits. Or again, if you're work for a small company, at least have a short-term disability policy and have income that can get you, a year or two down the road if it's really serious, to allow you that income to come from the government.
We talked about the 50 to 60, 66% of your income, but there's also a cap to that short-term disability of around 3,300. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the number that's been given by policy. Insurance companies, they determine what that largest number that they are going to underwrite in terms of a policy. And so, as we can all understand, for some people listening, that $3,000 isn't enough to pay all their bills and their budget. And uh, however, it's also, you got to look at it, Chris, if they didn't have it at all.
Mhm.
So 100, right, 100% is uh, nice to have the 3,000. Maybe they really wanted it to be four. It's just not available in a short-term disability policy, income policy. But again, just it's that knowing that they have a good chunk that could, you know, not devastate them and be catastrophic and having nothing in that space. That's what we're trying to fill that gap for a lot of our local people listening.
And it's completely different when it comes to the long-term disability. That 3,000, 3,300, that shoots up a lot more. Is that correct?
That is true. In fact, we have coverage up to $20,000 a month that's available, if you will, for the doctors in our community. You know, that we have that long-term disability income to protect them. And I know that sounds like a massively huge number to a lot of our listeners, but you know, there are a lot of doctors that you know, make significantly more than that in a month. So you know, that's the range is again, but we're getting back to that threshold that we can't overinsure it. You're not going to get fill that gap between, let's say, 60 or 66 percent and higher to 100%. That's a gap that you're not going to be able to fill, you know, with buying a policy or getting it from a group disability income policy at work.
If somebody wants to, still work, depending on their disability status, if they still want to work, um, does it then, cancel out the policy? Is there options or riders or those kind of, things that they can talk to you about so that maybe they can supplement that income or raise that bar higher just a little bit?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is what's called partial disability, and this is an element where you go from perhaps even full disability to being able to partially disabled. There are times where the recovery that may take a year or more becomes significantly better.
Mhm.
And but you still, let's say, don't have the use of your right arm. You know, perhaps that's now a partial disability and you're able to still keep the policy and able to still monthly get benefits and go back to work and do other jobs. There's also a thing called, you know, your occupation. We call it, you know, own OC, OCC, and that is the idea that you can get a rider to basically, you know, make sure that you're going to continue to get paid if you can't get a job in your occupation that you had before the disability event or situation. So, you know, there's different riders, and each one of those are evaluated based on the person and what they're doing, and you know, allows them to, you know, start to recover, get the income, and then have it the way they want it. So there's about 5 or 6 riders that we try to say, does this make sense? Do you need this? And that's part of the quote, especially on the long-term disability income policy, where you're really buying catastrophic protection for your, you know, your for either a 5-year window for State Farm or it's up to age 67. And you know, the up to age 67 is more expensive, but you are catastrophically protecting your income, you know, basically until you retire.
Going back to the idea of the golden egg, and, versus, yeah, golden goose idea, there is that you have to look back, you have to look out for yourself. In fact, they say that 1 in 4 of those that are 20 years or older, will become disabled in some way, and or will need this insurance. And 25%, that's still a high number when you think about it. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty high statistic if you, you know, get in a room of people together, you know, and go, you know, wow, there's about 20 people in this room and we're all in our 20s
Mhm.
and you know, 5 of us in this, you know, room, you know, could literally have a disability situation where we can't work for an extended period of time between
Mhm.
now and the time we retire.
Yeah.
That's quite an amazing thing. Counting through the room, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. That person's going to have a disability situation, and literally going through the room. It's a pretty high statistic, and that's why you know we really think it's important to look at this as your overall financial plan. You know, our State Farm slogan over the past few years that we've recently, you know, coined and copyrighted is protect then invest. and so the protection part of protecting your family is super critical, and your income is actually your biggest asset when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s. How much you're going to make over the next 30, 20, 30, 40 years is a massive asset you're trying to protect with disability income insurance.
You had mentioned a few minutes ago, and by the way, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Erin Doan from Erin Doan State Farm Insurance, talking about disability insurance, something that people tend to skip past, not think about. And it's important to look out for themselves just as much as the golden eggs in their life. But as you mentioned a moment ago, that the largest golden egg of their life is that income and keeping that. Does purchasing short-term or long-term disability insurance affect Social Security disability insurance? Can they work together? Do they work against each other?
Yeah, I think they work together. There is a law. There's an allowance of stacking and between the two, between the Social Security Administration and the insurance companies is once again they're not going to allow you to make, between the combination of the two 100% of the income you were making or 110% or something like that. But they're going to provide enough to be stable, to give you enough income to be able to live. In that space, you may have to change some of your lifestyle over time, where perhaps have a less expensive vehicle, or have to, change other elements of your budget in order to, have some of the things you'd like to do in this life, even working through that sickness. And I think again, it's a misnomer that most people aren't realizing that disability is not always injury. Disability is oftentimes sickness more so than an injury. And I think it's important for people to consider that, when they're evaluating it. So, if there is an overlap or the Social Security amount does go down a little bit, the powerful thing is that that combination of the two will meet your needs. And if, let's say, it was a short-term disability and you had a 3-year policy and that policy went away, the Social Security Administration would relook at your situation, but just realize that they oftentimes aren't paying 60%. So that's where long-term disability conversations come in, because they're not even providing 60% often with the Social Security Administration. So when you get your own policy, you're able to have a lot better lifestyle and pay a lot more bills by having taken care of you as the golden goose who provides the income for your family. And at Easter time, knowing that these golden eggs that you're creating in terms of your income really matter and really make a huge difference and can for your family, and have hope because life is so unpredictable.
I've always wondered in regards to short-term versus long-term disability insurance. Um, if you is it part of the same package? And in sort of the scenario, something happens to you, it's looked at as short-term, but then it develops into long-term. Do you have to make policy changes, or are you already protected based on that level that you purchased in?
Great question. I think it's the benefits that you've chosen at work. So if you have chosen short and long-term disability at work, most do, some don't, some opt out. I have a situation of a friend whose adult son opted out, super healthy, 26-year-old,
Mm,
extremely healthy at the time, and got very, very sick for an extended period of time, but opted out of long-term disability at work. I would not recommend that. So
mm,
when the benefits options come up at work and you have the ability to take short and long-term disability at work, take it. If you work for a small business and you don't have the ability to have that protection, sometimes the small business owner will consider it as a group benefit. Sometimes the owner will consider giving you additional income to pay for this benefit on your own, where you own the policy and work with a company like State Farm to protect your income and have your own policy. But if you don't pick short-term and or long-term policies or benefits at work, you don't have them. You actually have to choose them. You have to choose to protect your income for your family and make those choices. The group benefits oftentimes have to be chosen in November of each year. And
Mhm.
individually, if you're considering protecting your family's income, we can give you a quote on a short-term and or long-term disability. We're trying to do it case by case based on your needs, who you are, what savings you have, what bills you have, and just having a conversation and really talking it through to make sure we're not over-insuring you
Mhm.
to get you a policy you can't afford, you're going to let it lapse anyways. We're really working hard to fit a solution that you can afford and keep to protect your family in case it happens. We're often using the word catastrophic. What would
Mhm.
be catastrophic to you? That's what we're trying to protect.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, how about two, three, four quick points when considering that insurance policy? What are the top three or four for you when you're talking to those customers?
I would say the number one thing is to say in your budget, what would completely change your lifestyle? And I think the biggest thing would be housing.
Mm.
What is your housing expense? And that could include taxes and insurance. And I would say food, and that would be in your utilities,
Mm.
especially heat, and electric, and know that number and know that that number is protected.
Mm.
Um, so I would say find out what number two is. What do you have at work? Do you have any coverage at work? We've often spoken with small business employees, and they think, I don't think I have it, but maybe I do.
Mm.
I would say that's the number two is what exactly do you have in your benefit package at work? That's super critical to know. Do you need any insurance that you own and control from a company like State Farm through my agency? That would be probably number two.
Okay.
And I would say number three would be consider this, which is going to be the hardest thing to hear. What if it was you? What if literally today something happened and you could not work for a year?
Mm.
It's a hard thought, but what would you do? Where would you live? Who's going to help you? And consider it financially to what that would look like. And I know that's hard and harsh to hear, but protecting your family in this way with disability income insurance can be a cost-effective way to take it off the table and have peace of mind, be able to sleep at night. And if something really bad happened in this space where you got really sick or hurt, you're going to be okay. You're going to have the money to continue on.
Yeah, good information. One more question came to mind before we wrap up. In a situation where you have your spouse and he or she is working, bringing in income, can that affect your disability insurance?
That in particular, no, because your relationship with your group policy is on your own, and that's what you're going to get for your income that you were providing. So they're going to look at the dollar income that you have, that you were bringing into the family,
Mhm.
and then your situation, the seriousness, the size of it, in terms of and the length of time, and that can change and evolve. But the short answer to the question is no. Your
Okay.
that income is looked at as separately. How you would get benefits from a policy that you own or from your group disability income would be looked at as separately.
All right, great information there. Aaron, if people have additional questions, they can reach out to you. And how do they do that?
Yeah, we are located on US 10 in Ludington. We're half a mile east of Meyer, and we're open 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I have 6 licensed people that work for me, and we're ready and willing to listen to your needs and your situation, have you bring in your benefits, and just be more informed. We love to educate. You can find us at ludingtoninsurance.com or call us at 231 757 3115.
All right, great information there. And if you missed any part of this segment, you can watch it right there on our WMOM or Hot Country Hits Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well. Make sure you hit the subscribe button there. Erin, thanks for talking about this topic. It seems like it's a very important topic, obviously, and something that we might tend to overlook, but we should not. Because, as you say, probably in the insurance business, you never know when something might happen. Is that fair?
That's fair, 100%.
Absolutely. All right. Erin Doan from Erin Doan State Farm Insurance joining us this morning here on 102.7 Mom FM and Hot Country Hits 99.9.